Boy, that's dark. There we go. All right, so go ahead and tell me about cell organelles. Let's talk about them. What do we know? Pick any organelle. Just talk about it. Tell me the name of an organelle and its structure and function. Tell me about the nucleus. By controlling protein synthesis. Yeah, that was very specific. That was nice. So a lot of times people tell me things like, it controls the cell or it's the boss. Those are great analogies. But the question is, how does it control? When we talk about protein synthesis, now we're talking about everything that a cell does, right? So whether a cell is developing, a cell is making new organelles, a cell is going ahead and sending chemical messages, it all involves protein synthesis. And the thing to remember is your cells are different. So every nucleus in every cell has all of the genetic information inside each of your cells. But the nucleus doesn't use every piece in every cell. And the way I like to describe this is you have an eyeball, and all of your cells are eye cells that help your eye function to see. Your nucleus inside those cells is not using the information to build a toe. Any of you have a toe growing out of your eye besides Peter? No. Okay. So, and likewise, you don't have an eyeball on your toe. Is anyone looking at the inside of their shoe right now? Except for Carlo. Anyone else? All right. So that's the point. The nucleus chooses inside each cell which pieces of genetic information to use. So by controlling protein synthesis, it controls the function of the cell. Okay? And since we're talking about protein synthesis, can anyone tell me the name of the organelle that is responsible for making proteins? Yes, Natalie. The ribosome, very good. So the ribosome are those little round organelles. They are sometimes on another structure. Okay, anyone know the name of that structure? If they're not in that structure, they're floating freely in the cytoplasm. But nonetheless, what they do is they read the message, the hereditary message that comes from the nucleus, and they make the proteins. Okay, they use the amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins. And where does that come from? Where do these amino acids come from? Where does all the things the cell needs, amino acids, the lipids, the fatty acids, the nucleotide bases, the simple sugars, the oxygen, where do all these things come from? It comes from the food you eat and the air you breathe, the water you drink, right? All these things you take in for a reason so that we can get these things to the cells, okay? So I gave you a lot of time to think about it. What's the structures that the ribosomes are sometimes located on? Yeah, Peyton. I'm sorry? So the ribosome is the structure that makes proteins, and sometimes we find it on another structure, and sometimes we call this structure rough. Ribosomes rough, R and R, keep it together. So the rough what? Looking for the name of the organelle. Looking at your note sheet. Yeah, Grady.
Endoplasmic.
Good. Everyone please say endoplasmic reticulum. Good. So there's rough endoplasmic reticulum that has ribosomes, and then there's smooth endoplasmic reticulum that does not have ribosomes. Well, if it has ribosomes on it, and it's the ribosomes make proteins, it only makes sense that the endoplasmic reticulum has something to do with those proteins. And a matter of fact, if you look at what you wrote, you should have written that the rough endoplasmic reticulum's job is to process and transport those proteins. And the structure's got these little passageways. It looks like these little back and forth passageways, and they're also located right outside the nucleus, which also makes sense. If the nucleus is going to send out directions for proteins to be made, then the structures that make the proteins, package and transport the proteins, they all should be located right outside the nucleus, right? And so that's exactly what happens, okay? So the smooth endoplasmic reticulum processes another organic compound, the lipids. So it takes the fatty acids, helps to modify those lipids, okay, and transport them throughout the cell. Tell me about another organelle, another part of the cell, anything we haven't talked about on the sheet. Sometimes we're going to want to get rid of these things that are made, the proteins, the lipids. Sometimes we're going to export them, release them from the cell. For instance, if your cell is a nerve, the nerves send electrical signals, and at the very end, okay, at these little structures called dendrites, they release chemicals into the blood or across a space to another nerve cell. And whenever a cell releases something, releases a chemical, okay, it's exporting materials, getting rid of it. Is there anything on your sheet there that exports materials from the cell, that packages things and releases it from the cell? Just call it out. Good. Everyone please say Golgi Apparatus. I need everyone to say Golgi Apparatus. Thank you. Or Golgi body. So the Golgi apparatus' job is to package those proteins and those lipids and those chemicals that cells will use to communicate through your blood to other cells. And so it packages these materials in little spherical structures. Anyone know what they're called? They're called vesicles. vesicles, vesicles. And the vesicle is just the package. And as a matter of fact, the vesicle is made of the same lipid material that the cell membrane is made of. So when the vesicle runs into the cell membrane, it actually fuses and releases its contents to the outside of the cell. Okay? And what's the job of the cell membrane, since we just brought it up and talked about it? What is its job? Obviously, one of the jobs is to release materials from the cell, such as when a vesicle fuses with it, but it also wants to control what else? Are there things outside the cell that want to come in a cell? Sure. And so it wants to control not only what goes out of the cell, but what comes into the cell. Very good. That's why we call the cell membrane, we call it the gatekeeper. We call it the security guard. Its job is to control what goes out and what comes in the cell. Okay? So it doesn't just allow things to just pass in and out as they feel like it. Some things get in very easily. Things like oxygen, because the cell needs oxygen. Things like glucose come in very easily, a simple sugar, right? And some things get exported very readily, like carbon dioxide, which is a waste product. The cell wants to get that out. Okay, so those things pass through very, very easily. Other things may not pass as easily. Okay, so that's the job of the cell membrane. And give me some other organelles. What else are you seeing on your sheet that we haven't talked about yet? Alyssa, give me one thing on your sheet. Give me one organelle. Samantha, give me an organelle. Chris, give me an organelle. Just name an organelle we haven't talked about yet. Peter, give me an organelle. That one we just talked about. How about the cell wall? Let's take a vote. Is a cell wall found in animal cells? One finger, yes. Two fingers, no. Cell wall found in animal cells. Very good. The cell wall is not found in animal cells. It's only found in plant cells, and it's used for structure and support. It's made of cellulose, which is a sugar, a very rigid sugar. And it's the reason we don't have a real plant in this room. Actually, that orchid is a real plant. Those are real orchids back there. And so the orchid, it is kind of tied up, but you can see the green stem on the orchid, right? And the green stem has structure to it. Well, how does it have structure if it's not made of wood and it's not made of bone? Well, each cell has a cell wall. And so that cell wall will give us some rigidity. It's the reason blades of grass can stand up straight, because all of the cells have a cell wall. Okay? How about another thing that plants have that animals don't have? The thing that makes it green. Which organelle makes the plant green? What's that?
I don't know how to say it.
Go ahead, go for it. Good effort, good effort. Everyone please say the word, look at that word, and please say chloroplast. Chloroplast. Good. So a chloroplast job, it contains a pigment, which means coloring, called chlorophyll, which makes it green. So anytime you see a living thing that's green, it most definitely is green because it has chlorophyll in it. Okay? Chlorophyll's job is to absorb light, and that's one of the things that the chlorophyll does. It takes the light from the sun, it takes the carbon dioxide from the air, it takes water, and if it's a plant that comes from the roots, and it photosynthesizes. And when things photosynthesize, they make their own food. They are autotrophs, right? Auto self, troph food, make food by itself. Okay? So the chloroplast is the organelle that does all of this for an autotroph, and in particular for plants. Okay? Any more organelles that only plants have? There's one more on your sheet. Animals have these too, but the plants have a very large one of these. What? You gotta just speak up. What? Come on you. What does it start with? What letter? A V. Very good. Everyone see the V word? Anyone want to try to say it? Everyone please find the word that starts with a V and please say vacuoles. Good. So plants have it. Animals have vacuoles too, and plants have a large vacuole. What's the job of the vacuole? Stores food and water. That's simply it. So I'm sure you've all seen plants like that orchid that we looked at earlier, or green plants in your house, or plants that are just green with no woody stems, and they droop. Anyone ever see a drooping plant? What does that usually tell you when the plant droops? Well, it would be brown, wilted, and dried out if it was dead. But if it's just drooping, what does it tell you about the plant? Tells you it needs water. Very good. Okay? Tells you it needs water. So the reason it needs water is because the large vacuole is like giant inside the cell. Well, imagine that thing that's normally filled with water being empty. It starts to shrivel. When it's empty and shrivelly, it has a lot of empty space inside the cell. And so the cell walls, which are normally pushed out from the vacuole, start to bend inward. And if all the cells collectively bend inward together, they're not providing support, and so the plant droops. Until you give it water again, it absorbs it, goes to all the cells, and all the vacuoles fill up, and the vacuoles push out on the cell walls, and now you have the plant standing upright again. So just to let you know what's happening inside all the cells. Good. So those are three things we just said. We have the chloroplast, the large vacuole, and the cell wall that a plant has that animals don't have. What about things that an animal cell has that a plant does not have? There's two of them on your sheet. One starts with an L and one starts with a C. Yeah. A lysosome. Everyone say lysosome. And a lysosome kind of looks like a vesicle. It's another membrane-bound organelle that's just kind of a package. And the lysosome package is very, very particular. It's very specific. It contains digestive enzymes. So enzymes are specified proteins that help to speed up reactions. And you have enzymes in your saliva, enzymes in your stomach, enzymes in your intestines that break down food. Well, the lysosome is very, very similar, and its digestive enzymes are used to wear down worn out cell parts and waste within the cell and break them down. Okay? What's another organelle that animal cell has that a plant does not have? The last one. Yeah. Everyone please say centriole. Anyone know what the centriole does? Okay, the centriole is involved in cell division. It does this by moving chromosomes around. Chromosomes are the largest structures that your DNA is made of. When we talk about genetics and how you have inherited all of your wonderful traits that make you you, we'll talk a lot about chromosomes. Right now, it's enough to know that every time the nucleus wants to send out some genetic information, some hereditary material into the cell's cytoplasm for protein synthesis, it's reading a part of the chromosome. The DNA is not just floating freely within the nucleus, it's bound on these large structures. So the best way I can say this is to you, if you want to make a recipe, you might take out a recipe book, right? The recipe book would be like the piece of genetic information in the nucleus. However, the nucleus is like a library. It contains thousands and thousands of books. So whereas making a protein might take one book, a chromosome is the whole library, all of the information. And you have 23 pairs of chromosomes, so you basically have 23 different libraries, okay? So just to kind of give you some analogies so you can keep all of the different terms straight. So since we talked about sending things to the cytoplasm, what is the cytoplasm? Alyssa, Samantha, Chris, cytoplasm. All we have to do is read off of our note sheet and tell me what you wrote. Okay, someone else. Yep. God, we're going to ignore that phone for right now. It transports materials through the cell. It's a jelly-like substance. So you've got your cell, you got the organelles floating within something, right? It's not just empty space. Well, the stuff that surrounds them is the cytoplasm, the jelly-like substance, okay? So its job is to go ahead and support and all those organelles, all the materials that go through, whether it's taking sugars from the cytoplasm, things like that, taking them and letting them travel throughout the cell. Okay? So you guys look at what other organelles are needed, and I'll be right with you. Hello. Sure. Okay, thanks. Bye. Chris, go see Miss Beliza, please. Okay. You don't need any of your stuff. Just leave your stuff here. Just go see her real quick. She'll be right. You'll be right back up. Okay. Miss Beliza's office, assistant principal. Okay. So what else we got? What didn't we cover yet? Samantha, what didn't we cover yet? Alyssa, what didn't we cover on the sheet? Going down the sheet. Peter, what do you got? The what? The cell what? No, I just didn't hear you. Did we cover everything? What are we missing? The what? Oh, the plasmid. Okay, so a plasmid is a part of a bacterial cell. It's just a circular piece of DNA that is not in a nucleus. You know, bacterial cells don't have a nucleus, so it has to have DNA. It has some DNA that's just kind of floating freely, but it has these very special little parts called the plasmid. And they're really important because we use them in genetic engineering, in genetic research. So we'll talk more about them another time. The thing to know about them for now is that, you know, bacterial cells have them. They are a cell function. They're just not in plant cells or animal cells. Anything else on our cell term sheets that we should talk about? Okay, so that gives you a really great overview of cell structure and function. And so I hope at this point you'll have a really good understanding of that, and you'll know all there is to know about cells going forward.